And so before we have the show, or before you hear what you're going to hear, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about what's going to happen on stage. It's a musical conversation. You're going to hear some wonderful works by celebrated Latino composers, and our artists are going to come and present these works. But the work that I'm presenting is called Interview, and it's an interview with Stephen R. Gerber himself. When I received the award to create this, I didn't know who Stephen R. Gerber was, and I started looking him up, and I started learning about him, and I was very much inspired by not just his music, but also his process. And so today you're going to hear a work of his that is called 3 Folk Song Transformations. And I think it's a very good example of how he was someone who was extremely experimental and someone who was who I'm having a dialogue with musically. So who is Stephen R. Gerber? He is an esteemed composer, born in Washington, D.C., has degrees from Haverford and Princeton, and is initially known for his avant-garde style, blending atonal and serial techniques. He later shifted towards a more tonal approach while retaining his expressive depth. And the work that I highly recommend is his viola concerto and also some of his Symphony No. 1. The thing about Stephen Gerber is that he was someone who got to work with Robert Paris, who was someone who was really interested in like new music, modern music, atonal, you know, that stuff that you hear in the backgrounds in movies, and it sounds very like dissonant. And then over time, he became much more interested in smaller chamber works, more melodic works. And these are some of the things that I was really gravitating to. So the very work that you're going to hear, the piece that I wrote, it's called Interview, was inspired by this highly unusual process that Stephen R. Gerber had. And it was a process of taking maybe someone's name, or maybe taking things that were visual, or doing things that were not necessarily musical at first, and then turning them into music. And so, to encapsulate his compositions, I started thinking a lot about other composers who did that, like Mozart. I don't know if it's true, but I heard that he would take die and roll them, and whatever numbers came up, that was how he sequenced chords. Who knows if that's true, but it's fun. I think that's really interesting. Leonard Bernstein would come up with melodies, or like he would toil over, like when he was a performer, he was alive, but when he was composing, it was lonely, and he would toil over his work and have to really think outside of the box to write. And so for me, what was interesting was I was interested in like visual art, and I'm someone who does a lot of visual art as well. And like, the Surrealist game, Exquisite Corpse, or like taking a number game like the Banana Game and just making stuff up, that's pretty much what I did. The first experiment was text as chords. So the initial experiment involved superimposing text from Stephen Gerber's Interview onto staff paper, treating it as a graphic score to visually plot chordal changes. And so this was basically me taking actual text and no longer thinking of it as text. It was almost like, let's see if some magic will happen if I take the words and start making chords based on just the letters. This was experiment number 1. Experiment number 2 was drawing phrases. So I was really taken away by, as I read the scores and listened to Gerber's music, that there was not just the audio, the amazing, music itself, but also when you looked at it, you could see what was happening. You could hear and see at the same time. And what I loved about this was I was thinking of notation as drawing rather than notation. I was thinking of just like, almost like abstract art. And so this experiment involved drawing shapes representing musical phrases directly onto manuscript paper, using the staff lines as a landscape. I created shapes resembling mountains and ocean waves to replicate them in musical notation and emphasizing the undulating curves. And so this process allowed me to explore phrasing as something visually conceptual. And what would happen if we notated that? Would it also come through in sound? And the final experiment was score as tapestry. So This particular experiment was more about how do I take the idea of like thinking about the staff lines and thinking about the visual of creating interweaving sections, just drawing like larger shapes, drawing things that are repetitive and creating a pattern, and then notating that, what would happen. So these are the three movements. Each movement of interview is a different solo instrument. And so the first movement is called For a Long Time, I Preferred to Write Solo. And it's about how Gerber initially favored solo vocal or chamber works over orchestral compositions. But after gaining unexpected success with his symphony and serenade for strings, he found inspiration to create more orchestral pieces through his great affinity might still lie in writing for solo instruments. So he loved the soloist. The second movement is called Frankly, I Have No Idea Where Music is Going. And he acknowledges that the vast diversity and richness of music across different genres and cultures, stating that he finds it challenging enough to keep up with the existing musical landscape, including classical, jazz, and world music. And he didn't ever want to speculate. I think he was really interested in just making things, you know? And that's a work for solo cello. And then the last work is just called Interview with Stephen Gerber. And this movement is inspired by a quote, and it features a piano solo and reflects his perspective on the enjoyment of experimenting with elements he doesn't naturally connect with. Yet he expresses discomfort with the notion of aligning with prevalent trends, preferring to perceive himself as an iconoclast rather than part of a broader movement. So he's very much an individual, and the music you're going to hear first is a piece by Stephen Gerber. It's called Three Folk Song Transformation. And then through music, I will interview him. Enjoy. Thanks.
For a long time, I preferred to write solo, vocal, or chamber works. I try to let the musical material decide the form for me. Sometimes, though, it is more of a challenge to set myself a technical problem in advance and see if I can make it work. Actually, I feel more like a composer when I am solving a technical problem than when an inspiration arrives out of nowhere. One of my composer friends told me this was puritanical of me.
Frankly, I have no idea where music is going. It's hard enough to keep up with what's already happened. It was only around 1988 when I fell in love with classic jazz. And catching up with all of that is time-consuming. I've always loved discovering for myself forgotten composers of the past. Even if most of them turn out to be justly forgotten. And what with writing my own music, I try not to even think about where music is going. Interviewees are always asking me whether I'm inspired by nature or by political relations. I say neither. I think my greatest affinity may be for writing pieces for solo viola, solo oboe, solo anything. The power of a singular voice. Thank